When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Scum YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be doing a video that was very similar to a video I did about how Robb could have won the War of the Five Kings. Well, in today's video, we're going to be talking about Balon Greyjoy. How could Balon Greyjoy have won the War of the Five Kings? Is it even possible? What could he have done better to help them come out on top? But before we get into the video, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment, please do. It helps channel grow. Rich people that might like this content as well. Also, if you guys like to follow the Instagram and Twitter, I've been uploading on those a lot more with just stuff from the personal life or for the channel. So yeah, if you guys want to do that, the links will be in the description. But getting into the actual video. Now, Balon Greyjoy, to me, out of all five of the kings, has the worst position. He doesn't command a great army. He has a good fleet, but again, not a great land army. Their political influence is probably the least of the five kings. And he's not really going for the Iron Throne, really. He's just trying to be a king, kind of like Robb's situation, where he's just going to guard the Iron Islands, and I guess then he tries to claim the North as well. But if we look at what Balon Greyjoy's plan was, how can we critique Balon Greyjoy and make his plan actually make sense, or how could he have come out on top? So the first thing to take note of, the Greyjoys' kind of religion is one of the big things that holds them back. The whole idea that they will not buy things, or they will not do things to buy their freedom and stuff like that, holds them back tremendously. Because if they had it allied with either Robb or Stannis or Renly or even the Lannisters, they would have come out on top on this situation. But they don't. They decide to do no alliances, nothing, and to go against the Starks. Now, to be completely honest, this was the best thing they could do with their religion when it comes to if they wanted to take a whole kingdom. Right? Because this is the only way, because all of Robb's forces are gone. They're not going to be able to get up north very quickly. And you can hold the north fairly easily if you have a good land army. If you can hold the neck, you're not going to be able to get up from the southern side. So the thing is, we're going to have to go against all of the Greyjoys' religion. And that's one of the reasons I think the Greyjoys are interesting, but I also do not like the Greyjoys because they are very much held back because of their religion and kind of their beliefs. So we're going to have to look past that. We're going to have to say, no, we are not going to, invade the north, and we will actually ally with someone. So at the time of Balon Greyjoy and when they go to attack the north, it wasn't really looking good for the Lannisters. It really wasn't looking good. You had Renly, who was still alive, Stannis still alive, and they both outnumbered, or I guess whichever one would have won, outnumbers the Lannisters. At this point, we'll just say right now it's Renly who has the more of the forces. So at this point, Renly would be the most opportune people to join up. But I think if Balon Greyjoy is kind of smart, right, he lets some of the players kind of dwindle. He kind of lets this go on for a little while. So Balon Greyjoy kind of sits back and starts having talks. He listens to Robb Stark's offer. He kind of, he tries to send a letter to King's Landing, tries to figure out how much he can get from all the kings that are still available right now, whether that's being more land, whether that's them getting a lot of the Westerlands or something like that. Because the main problem with the Iron Islands has always been they can't really self-sustain on resources. They have to plunder. They have to get resources from other people. It's very similar to how Japan was in World War II, where they, to fuel their war efforts and to do stuff like that, they had to live off of trade and stuff like that, or invading other countries. So that's where I've always found a parallel with the Greyjoys. And the Japanese in World War II also had a really good navy, something that could rival the United States earlier on in the war. So I think for me, the big thing that the Greyjoys are looking for here is, one, if they could get their independence. I don't think it's likely, but that would be something that would be interesting. Two would be, you would want a big alliance, right? So you would want to be gaining something over this, whether that's Asha marrying Tommen, whether that's Asha marrying someone else, or if that's, you know, the Greyjoys just getting to be part of the small council and gaining more influence over the country. So that is what the Greyjoys are going to be looking for, or Balon specifically, out of an alliance with someone. So I think Balon Greyjoy is actually kind of smart and more or less waits until, I would say, around the Battle of the Blackwater, because I think that will give you a good chance to figure out who do you think is going to win this, because you have Stannis, you'd have Robb, and you would have Tywin left. Now, with the Battle of the Blackwater happening, what I could see happening is the Greyjoys would not team up with Robb, because the Greyjoys would have the least amount to gain from the Greyjoys compared to people like Stannis or Tommen, or not Tommen, Joffrey at this point, which more or less is Tywin. So the question would be, out of the two, Stannis or Tywin, who would the Greyjoys benefit more from? And the Greyjoys already don't like Stannis because he's the one that actually beat Victarion. So, and it kind of helped fuel the ending of the rebellion. So I actually believe that in this scenario, I think the Greyjoys would be in talks with Tywin. And I think what we would end up getting, happening is that the Greyjoys would join in on the Battle of the Blackwater as well, alongside the Tyrells, because the Greyjoys have way more to gain here. So I think what ends up happening is Marjorie ends up marrying Joffrey. That would be the alliance there. I think the Greyjoys would have Asha. I think she would be married to Tommen when he comes of age. I think Victarion, or maybe Balon himself, I would tend to believe it'd be Victarion, would be made master of ships and would be part of the small council. And that's kind of how they would start to gain some favor there. And then I also believe that since Stannis falls, that a lot of the territory of Dragonstone and a lot of the land in that region, and then possibly some of the lands, and actually I was going to say maybe some lands in the Stormlands, but technically if we're going off of Tywin's belief that all of his children are they own some claim to the Stormlands, I don't think he would do that. So I think what Tywin would do would, he'd be like, okay, well, all the lands that Stannis was basically in control of, you can have them, Balon. So that would give him kind of a foothold in the mainland. I definitely could see him getting maybe some of the lands of the houses in the Baratheon land area, just based upon the fact that they went against the crown, especially those that don't bend the knee. And then, so this would be the next part of it, right? I think the Greyjoys would be a very huge factor in helping take down Robb. Because here's the thing. The one thing that the Tyrells and the Lannisters really lacked was a really big navy. Like, they had the Red Wines, they had that fleet, but having a massive, the Greyjoys fleet is the best fleet in all of Westeros. I think it'd be very, interesting if they, instead of trying to attack Moat Cailin and pushing Robb back, even though I think the Red Wedding still happens in this scenario, I don't actually know it doesn't. So in this scenario, the Red Wedding actually would never have happened, because Catelyn would not have traded Jaime, because Bran Rickon would still be alive. So I think what would end up happening is, at this point now, the Greyjoys would then go from there, and they would actually probably start attacking the north. I think their whole objective would be trying to take Moat Cailin like they do in the normal, or show or book. And I think what would end up happening is, with this being said, the Lannisters and Tyrells now can kind of trap them. They would have this coordinated attack where the Greyjoys take Moat Cailin, cutting off Robb from the north, and then also you'd have the Lannisters and the Tyrells push them all the way back. So maybe a Red Wedding still would happen, just because of how dire the circumstances would be looking like for Robb. But one way or another, I believe Robb ends up losing. So I think what ends up happening here is the Greyjoys can also maybe claim some land in the north and in the Riverlands, depending on what Tywin wants to give them. So if you're looking at it from that point of view, right, I believe the Greyjoys have a lot to gain if they go with Tywin and they go with the Lannister-Tyrell alliance, especially before the Battle of the Blackwater. I think that's very important. If they go after, they're definitely not going to get as much, just because the Tyrells and Lannisters are already the winning power. And Tywin kind of already knows how Robb is going to go down in that scenario. Theon's an interesting one, because I think Theon would have still betrayed Robb, because Theon would have gone to see his father to get him to, Robb's side. And I believe that Balon would have ended up keeping Theon there until he made his decision. And then once he makes his decision, I think the same thing would have happened, right? Because Theon didn't want them to invade the North anyway, but they did, and he followed his father. So I think in the scenario, he would still follow his father. They would help the Lannisters do that stuff in the North later on. And this would spell disaster. This is complete and utter disaster for Robb, because at least in the normal sequence of events, the Greyjoys are kind of off by themselves. They're not really backed by Tywin or the Tyrells. In this situation, you have three major powers against you. They outnumber you by a ton. Their naval powers are vastly superior to your own. So I think in this scenario, Robb still ends up dying. Maybe he sees more of the dire consequences of his actions, and he just, bends the knee maybe in this scenario, based upon how difficult it would actually be to win against all three. I'm not sure how that would actually play out, but that is the best case scenario for Balon Greyjoy. It would be really to just say screw his own culture, which is the problem and the reason the Greyjoys are always held back in kind of growing as a power. Because if you look at how the War of the Five Kings played out, a lot of people gained and a lot of people lost. The Greyjoys are a weird one because they gained but lost at the same time, because they didn't really gain much power. They gained Deepwood Mont, they gained Moat Cailin, like they didn't, Torrhen Square, they didn't really gain much. They just kind of cut off the North, but they didn't really gain anything, because they all eventually lose all of that, and then Balon Greyjoy dies. So it's a weird kind of thing how it happens in the main story, where it's like you gain but then you lose. So in this scenario, the Greyjoys would gain a ton. They would gain a lot of land legally, where they could start to actually grow their own food and not have to pillage and stuff, even though that is their culture. See, the big problem with this video is, for any of this to work, we have to upheave the Greyjoys' culture and religion, or the Ironborn culture and religion. And that's just something that was never going to happen in the main story, and that's why I think it's actually very much impossible for Balon to have actually won or gained really anything out of the War of the Five Kings. But that is the video. I hope you guys all enjoyed this video. I think I'm probably going to do a how Renly could have won the War of the Five Kings next, even though I think that one's going to be super easy. But I think I'm going to do that one next. I really like doing these, like, kind of, not really what ifs, but how could they have done things differently, and how things would have played out. So thank you guys all for watching, and I'll see you guys all in the next video. Bye, guys.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.